Welcome back, theater lovers, to another exciting episode of the BSB Podcast. Today, we're asking ourselves, who doesn't love a bit of magic? And today's guest knows quite a bit about that topic.
With plenty of accolades to his name, including People's Choice Award and receiving top honors at the 2017 FISM North American Championships, he has been entertaining audiences around the world with his unique style of magic.
We're so excited to have Jim Vines on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jim.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. We're so excited to chat with you and really, wanted to go back a little bit on the timeline. Obviously, your passion for magic began at a young age. And so we're curious, what sparked that interest for you?
It was so funny. I certainly wasn't expecting it. It kind of came out of the blue. When I was 12 years old and I was at school one day, a friend of mine who I thought I knew said to me, "Hey, Jim, I'm a magician." And I had never really heard anybody say that to me before in a serious way. So, of course, I asked him, "Well, this is kind of a surprise, but would you show me some magic?" And he wouldn't do it. And I thought maybe he was just a little shy about it or whatever. And I asked him for a few days, he never would. But as luck would have it, one day my class is in line at the cafeteria to get lunch, and this kid, he had forgotten his milk money, and he asked if he could borrow a quarter. And I'm like, "Sure, but you got to show me a magic trick." And I'm telling you guys, he took that quarter and he just made it disappear right in front of my eyes. He had on short sleeves, no tricky boxes, no special assistant standing there, nothing like that. Just pure magic up close. And I was so blown away. I'll never forget the feeling of that. It just felt like the earth just disappeared from underneath my feet. Well, he wouldn't explain it to me, of course, because that's the magician's code. You can't share the secret. But I immediately at study hall went to the library at the school and found some books on magic, started studying, and never looked back. And I showed him. I went a few weeks later after I'd perfected the trick. I showed it to him. He was like, "That's cool." We started doing magic together. But no, it's like that. And ever since then, I've always been sort of in search of that sort of moment of wonder again. And every so often, I experienced it. I travel all over the world studying magic and watching magic. And the more you know about magic, the harder it is to get that sort of feeling. So
Sure.
I'm always blown away when once or twice a year I'll see something incredible that I've never seen before. And it just takes me back to that moment.
And is there a part of you that's still like, I have to know how that works? Kind of like with your friend?
Of course. I know it's terrible. I love to sort of marinate in the wonder as long as I can. But after a certain point, there's this analytical side of my brain that takes over and says, "Okay, now let's put the puzzle pieces together. Let's figure it out." Right.
So besides your friend, who sounds like it was a very big inspiration that kind of put you on this journey, who would you say at a young age was like your biggest influences as you're kind of learning magic, at 12 and kind of getting a little bit older?
There were so many, but by far, head and shoulders above all of them, is a magician named Lance Burton, who during the 1990s did a bunch of television specials. He performed in Las Vegas for about 35 years. Did actually, I believe he holds the record for most shows by a solo performer in Las Vegas, over 15,000 shows. And he did this incredible dove act that I saw in 1981 when I was a kid. I saw him on the Johnny Carson show on New Year's Eve, and it was the most breathtaking magic. Even to this day, I still haven't seen anything quite as perfect and quite as magical as that. Um, and I'm really happy to say that Lance is now a friend of mine. He actually helped me, worked with me a bit, and gave me some notes and tips on the act that I took to the North American Championships of Magic, where I won, and it was very exciting. And that was the routine I did on Penn and Teller Fool Us. So Lance has these incredible insights, and he's one of these guys who can watch a full 6 or 7 minute act and think for a minute and then say 5 words that would take somebody else 2 weeks to sort of get to that same level of nuance. It's really remarkable, his level of knowledge about magic.
It sounds like he's been such an instrumental part in kind of helping you to continue on in this career.
Definitely, and not too many people do dove magic anymore. I think there's kind of, people have a kind of a feeling of, well, and circuses see the same thing. They don't want to see live elephants or, live animals sort of in a performing environment too much. Um, but a lot of those techniques of making how the doves are made to appear, those techniques can be adapted to other magic effects, and so I use a lot of those. It's funny, even in close-up magic and things like that, you can still find ways to use those techniques. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that transference definitely makes sense. I'm curious, was there, as you like started out and started gaining more knowledge on all of these skills, was there a particular skill that you had a hard time, like that took you a while to kind of nail down?
Yeah, a lot of the sleight of hand magic, the stuff that is done without any special prepared props or any special equipment, just the pure hand magic, which to me is kind of like the closest thing there is to real magic because it's you just borrow something from someone and then make some magic with it. That stuff is incredibly difficult, and, there are simple it's sort of like, playing a musical instrument. There are simple aspects of it, but then the more advanced you wanna go and the more challenging you wanna make it for yourself, and that you can go down that path and kind of take it to an extreme, but it's really funny, and I guess this is also like music. Some of the most beautiful and profound pieces of magic sometimes are the simplest, and so it's not necessarily the more difficult and complicated the better, although that's sometimes the case. But I've always loved a challenge. I've always loved uh you know dexterity and sort of visual magic, and so I've spent a lot of time working on that stuff.
With the mention of being a sleight of hand artist, you're an award-winning sleight of hand artist at that. With the exception of maybe your friend who pulled the coin and made it disappear at a young age, what drew you to that kind of type of magic compared to maybe some of the other forms that you see on stage?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, now I really do all kinds of magic, everything from grand illusions, where at our show in Times Square at the Broadway Magic Hour, we get a kid out of the audience and levitate the kid up in the air 5.5 feet,
Oh,
past the
wow.
hoop, and then bring the kid back down and send him back out. And this kid is not in on it. The kid never met us before that moment. And so I'll do big stage illusions like that. Um, and also mind reading magic. I love that kind of thing. Mentalism we call it, and I always try to be careful to make sure that people understand that it's not a psychic phenomena. I personally, maybe there are people out there who are psychics. I certainly am not. I like to say I use my five senses to create the illusion of a sixth sense, right?
Sure.
But it's an illusion, and but from doing all of those kinds of things, and also sleight of hand magic, like the thing I did on Penn and Teller. So I have sort of an interest in all of it, and it's that kind of thing where I believe that some magicians will specialize exactly in one kind of thing and sort of never deviate from that. But I always, my wife always accuses me of looking at the next shiny object and saying, "Yeah, what's over here?" Um, but but I always feel like we have one life. We should embrace it and do as much as we can.
Do you feel like you ever stop can you ever stop learning in this thing or in this like topic of magic, or do you feel like you just can continue to absorb as much as possible out there?
Yeah, new techniques and ideas are being invented every day. And so, but we do stand on the shoulders of giants. So every single thing, and I'm sure this is the same, whether it's, dance or painting or sculpture or acting, there are certain, legendary achievers that we get inspired by and maybe sometimes emulate. But everybody wants to sort of put their own touch on things and make something new. So in that way, you are always learning something new, even if it's teaching yourself, inventing something new and sort of creating something that hasn't existed before. But it's funny to me too. I'll sometimes find a really old magic book, from 100 years ago or more, and start reading it and find some little nugget in there that is so obscure and so clever, and I'll show it to well posted magicians who will just look at it and have no idea, you know. So these secrets can be buried, and you can find them, and they're just it's that's just such a delight, you know.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I'm curious, you mentioned obviously there's kind of like these different dynamics or kind of subsets of magic. And then obviously you have those of us who are completely outside of magic. Do you think that there are like any common misconceptions around like whether that be of folks who have no experience in magic and how they're perceiving what's happening, or even maybe amongst the magic community? Like a certain type of magician against something else.
Yeah, there are a couple of things like that. One is, and you don't see it this very often anymore. But I grew up in Alabama in a very conservative and Christian household, and so my parents, when they saw that I was studying magic, they immediately sort of got this idea that I don't think that's such a good idea. There's something connected with the spirit world or the dark side, or who knows what they kind of thought. And it took me many years to sort of prove to them and show them that it's a performing art. It's not, has nothing to do
Sure.
with anything spiritual or mystical. Although I'll get to that later, but I do believe in magic, but that's for another topic. But inside the magic community, though, you have you may find this in other art forms as well, but you'll find certain types of magicians will have um, they'll kind of look down their nose at something. Like, for example, like hardcore close-up sleight of hand artists will see a stage illusionist with a big flashy box and a girl that gets inside the box, and they slice and dice, and and then she vanishes, and and they could look at it and say, if I had that box, I could do the same thing. But it's just not that simple. And I kind of had that prejudice myself, I feel like, before I actually, got involved with some of the larger illusions myself. And what it comes down to is in the larger illusions, you get more into like the stagecraft and the blocking. And where does everybody stand? How is everybody moving so that the story that we're telling is clear? It becomes much more like in blocking in a play or a movement piece or dance where, you know, you just can't walk out there and willy-nilly try to spin the box around and try to open the doors and figure out, oh, now I'm behind the door. Wait, I should be on the other side. It's like all of these things have to be worked out beautifully. And when you see an incredible illusionist on stage, and the dancers are just moving effortlessly, and the box pops open, and the beautiful girl jumps out, and he catches her, and it looks simple, but it has to look simple. It has to look effortless.
Sure.
But you think about the hours and hours of rehearsal time and thought and choreography that went into it. But yeah, I think it's you probably find um, these kind of misconceptions in any art form, I assume.
When you're talking about a routine like that and, all the different pieces that go into it and how you're building it, how do you kind of develop a routine kind of from initial idea to a finished performance? And does it depend on like the tricks that you're doing or the illusions that you're doing or the sleight of like how do you personally kind of develop that process?
Well, like at the Broadway Magic Hour, where we do this show on the weekends, we really, my performing partner, Carl Mercurio, and I came to it with the idea of we want to tell a story, and we want the audience to have a certain kind of experience. And so we basically thought about the the through line and the sort of narratives. I mean, we even
Sure.
have a subplot in this show. I mean, it's like it's not it's not a linear narrative by any stretch of the imagination, but it does tell a story and it has a point of view. And I feel like if you can, and the real pros tend to think about that first, because when you
Okay.
leave the theater, you know, you want people to be thinking about, you want them to be left with something tangible, a message that they can really keep with them. The message that that we have, for example, is anything is possible, and if you believe in yourself, you can do anything. And I totally believe those two statements through and through. I was always taught that when I was growing up, and I believe it now. And I like to be able to, in that moment of wonder. when the audience, when their mind is sort of turning inside out, to sort of deliver that message. The audience is in a very vulnerable moment. And I think that you can come away from something like that really comprehending the idea that anything is possible. And so uh so we kind of came at it from that perspective. And as for the tricks themselves, a lot of times if I'm coming up with a new illusion, I kind of work backwards. I'll think about, what do I want the final moment of wonder to be? And then I just use my knowledge about magic to how to piece that together and make it work. Because if you start from if you start from the beginning and don't really know where the ending is going to be, it's hard to get to the ending that you want to get to. And I think a lot of writers probably work that way as well. And so it's, and I studied writing some in college, so that's you bring these different sort of skill sets from different art forms and kind of transpose them into magic. You know what I mean? It seems to work.
I never thought of having a trick from the. It makes sense though, because you're gonna have that big moment. So what is it? You kind of have to like actively like work your way backwards to determine how to achieve that. Like that makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. Now, maybe I'm saying too much.
You're giving away all your secrets.
That's right. Sorry.
Well, and that's interesting. I'm curious, you kind of talked about the storyline and the plot and maybe a subplot here or there. Do you think that that is kind of a deciding factor on whether or not a performance maybe is lackluster versus memorable? Like, is there any particular piece in a show that you're like, this needs to be what we do in order for this to really truly kind of wow the audiences?
Totally. Audiences now are much more sophisticated than ever before because they've seen so much content. They're just overwhelmed every day on their phone. I mean, even a youngster, is seeing, magic tricks on their phone. And so the the tricks themselves, uh, I don't want to say don't matter, because in a magic show, obviously the tricks matter. But what matters so much more is having them orchestrated in a way that leaves a memorable impression. One of the things that bothers me so much is when I go see a magician and it's just a series of unrelated tricks. Now I'm gonna, you know, uh, push the spike through my arm. Oh, and then now I'm gonna find your card. And what does those two things have to do with each other? And now I'm gonna ball up this $20 bill. And it's gonna float in the air. Those three things have nothing to do with each other. I don't understand the point. And
Sure.
I feel like unless your story is, you know, I'm a wizard and I'm here just to prove to you and demonstrate to you that I can do all these things that I claim I can do, I guess that would be the story in that case. But, you know, most often I think audiences now are accustomed to seeing a story with a real beginning, a middle, and an end, and they don't feel satisfied if it's just a series of unrelated tricks.
Which would make sense. Absolutely. I feel like people want a story. They want the emotional catharsis that comes from having that journey through whatever show you're seeing with the person who's putting it on.
Exactly. And just like with a stand-up comic, for example, you want callbacks, you want these moments where after 30 or 40 minutes we're into the show and the performer says something that's a callback. We're like, oh yeah, we're all in on this. We all understand the language of this show now. And that's enjoyable too on another level. So
With so many incredible, like, again, we talked about these accolades, we talked about all these things that you've done with your career. What do you feel like has been a truly, like, what's been a highlight of your magic career?
Oh, by far, appearing on Penn and Teller Fool Us was just unbelievable. Um, First of all, the whole production crew they have, they're just the nicest and most unbelievably professional organization. It's just so impressive. I can't even begin to express what a delight that was. And they, for Penn and Teller, that show is their love letter to magic. I mean, they've spent over 50 years performing together, and the world has rewarded them so beautifully, and they want to give back. And really, what the show is it's a showcase for all of these magicians out there who have worked hard to create something unique. They certainly don't have guys who go into a magic shop and buy a trick and then show up and do it. You really have to come up with something they've never seen before, something that's very different. And then they wanna put it on on a stage in front of the world, and it was really funny. I don't know whether this was a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm backstage waiting for my turn to go on. I can hear the performer before me is out there on stage. I hear there's 1,200 people in their live, theater at the Rio in Las Vegas, and the whole audience is going crazy, very loud. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm next. I've seen every episode of this show, and now I'm going to be out. It's going to be surreal. I'm going to be out there. And then Michael Close, who's one of the producers of the show, says to me, when you go out there and perform in a minute, you're going to be seen by more people in those 7 minutes than saw Harry Houdini in his entire career. And I'm like, thanks, Mike. I really appreciate that. Thanks for reminding me about that.
No pressure.
No pressure. But they were absolutely a delight. And one of the funny things that they don't tell you is that Penn and Teller are not supposed to know who is on the show until the performer actually walks out. They don't want to know who's coming out. And so the producers are actually like hiding you and keeping you secret. They don't want you bumping into. You're walking down some hallway and they're like, oh, they've got a headset on. They're like, they pull you out of the way, put you in a room for a second. They're on their way. They put you in a room. Coast is clear. Okay. And then you can go out and go down the hall again. It's so funny. But they take it very seriously, and they do a great job. So it's pretty amazing.
I was going to say, they definitely complimented you, mentioning how brilliant you were. Once you ended that performance, that set, like, how were you feeling? Like, were you completely overwhelmed, or did you like black out? Like, how did that go?
Well, it's funny because that routine is so complicated and so difficult. There's 35 magic effects in 5 minutes. And everything is sort of layered on top of one of another in terms of, the way the time is stacked. And you're like, if the third thing goes wrong, it's sort of like a Jenga tower where you're pulling out the blocks. The whole thing is going to have a problem. So, fortunately, before you shoot live for Penn and Teller and for the live audience, they do something called a camera rehearsal, where they bring you out there. There's nobody in the audience yet. It's just the stage crew and the 7 cameras and all the stuff. And you run through it with the music and everything, and they catch that. And that way, you've kind of got a B-roll in case something goes wrong. They're actually able to edit that where they would maybe cut to Penn and Teller for a reaction shot and then cut back to you, splice in that moment that looks good, and then cut to an audience and then cut back to you. And now you're back into the regular set, So that gives you a little bit of comfort. And my camera rehearsal went fine. I felt like, okay, no matter what, we're going to have something they can, they're going to have something that they can shoot, something they can show. But afterwards, I was really happy. Penn Jillette stays out in the house and kind of tells jokes to the audience when they're preparing for the next act. But Teller comes backstage and meets you and talks to you. And he's, between the two of them, Penn is the more like showman and actor, guy. And Teller is one of the most incredible minds that magic has ever produced. I mean, he knows everything. And this is what makes it so difficult. I mean, the two of them together, two of the greatest minds in magic ever, it's impossible to think about fooling them. But Teller especially has the deepest knowledge of anyone, in history, probably with magic. So, but that was really great to be able to talk to him for a few minutes. And he was like, oh, I loved it. And I saw the Slidini influence and I saw this, and he totally knew what I was doing. But just to have him sort of be on board with it and be excited about it, that was really fun.
It has to be such a great compliment to receive something like that from, Penn and Teller. Everybody kind of knows them, and to be called brilliant and to be praised for that. That shows just how much incredible work you're doing on stage to bring delight to people, but also just to put your love into to magic.
Well, even more importantly to me, it really helped us sort of land the gig at the Broadway Comedy Club because, you know, if you if your sales pitch is, hey, we've got this show and we're really good and just put us in there, it's kind of like, oh, all right, maybe. But you say, I was just on Penn and Teller Fool Us last month, oh, all right. And then they think, even if nobody's ever heard of him really, they've heard of that show. So they can put the logo
Right.
and then people see it and they go, oh, I know that show. Sure, I'll go see that. And that's one of the great things is they tell us, use this performance and use that video clip to take your career to the next level, and these days I think people probably more than anything, as far as at least magicians go, it's like, do you have a TV credit? It's kind of a thing. It's kind of like, until you have that, it's really hard um, to sell somebody on coming and seeing a show they haven't heard of, you
For
know?
sure. And speaking of that show, because you're currently bringing magic right to the heart of NYC with the Broadway Magic Hour, how did that show kind of come to be? And also, what is kind of, you talked about that narrative or that through point? What is kind of the through point for the show?
Well, the way it came to be was my friend Carl Mercurio and I, always both had a love for family magic. And it's something that in New York City you don't see a lot of. There are probably 14 magic shows running in New York City, live magic shows right now. They tend to be late night shows that start at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. They're for adults only. Some of them even say 21 and over, only admitted. And a few years ago, when I was in Las Vegas, I went to David Copperfield's show, and I walk in there, and he is the largest grossing magician of all time. He is literally a billionaire from doing magic. I mean, it
Sure.
boggles the mind, but he's one of the most successful entertainers of all time. And I go to his show, and I see 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 70-year-olds, everybody of all ages was there. It wasn't 21 and up, and it wasn't a kids show. It was families. I would see 3 generations at one table. And I started thinking, why is this not happening in New York City? I mean, obviously David Copperfield knows a thing or two about magic shows. Why is this not going on in New York? So it was already in my mind. And then I happened to be talking to Rich Brooks, who is the talent director at the Broadway Comedy Club. And I was saying, maybe we should do a magic show there. And he goes, I've always thought a family magic show would do extremely well here. Put it on at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when we don't have anything else, because they start the shows at 4, the comedy shows. And they go all the way till 1 in the morning, but they didn't have anything earlier in the afternoon. So the place is empty. And and he's thinking, oh, I can open up a new time slot. But also it was just a super, super good idea. And so we said, okay, we'll try it. And he goes, how many tickets do you think you can sell? I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, dude, I'm going to be very honest with you. 5, 20, 15. I don't really know. It could be anything. He goes, well, we'll put it on. We'll see. They put the show on their website, and within 72 hours, the whole room of 180 seats had sold out. And I'm
Oh,
like, what
wow.
is going on? And he sent me the spreadsheet of the ticket buyers. These were not friends and family. I didn't know any of these folks. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. So we do the show. Everybody loved it. He says, let's do it again. We start, and other guys I know who have shows in the city, they said the first one is easy to sell out. It's after that it gets harder. I'm like, I don't know. And the next one sold out, the next one, the next one. We've been running 2 years, selling out every weekend. So all I can say is it fills a need. We see a lot of grandparents bringing grandchildren, and I was thinking about that too. And it's sort of like, I have children, and I know um, their grandparents, my parents, live in Alabama, so they don't see the kids that often. They see them a couple of times a year, and I know when they're first reintroduced to the kids after being away from them for 6 months or whatever, it's like, well, how was school? Um, how's the baseball team? And like these sort of like generic questions. But if you can take that kid and say, let's go see a magic show. First of all, the kid's going to put down the electronics and go. And then secondly, now you have something really interesting to talk about afterwards. How did that kid float in the air? I mean, I didn't see any strings. Dude, he passed a hoop. There was no strings. I mean, what is going on? And the kids can have their theories, and you can really engage, and you have a lifetime memory And I think that's one of the reasons the show is really popular.
RJ, I think you can attest to this too, that, having gone to Broadway so many times, there's not always like as many family friendly programs out there. We see a lot of shows, and a lot of them you would not want to take your kid to. Or maybe you shouldn't take your kid to, but this sounds like this is truly something that is for the whole family.
100%. One funny thing too is at first, we started thinking, wow, we want to have people where they can come back. Should we, change everything from week to week? Although we didn't really want to, because once you get the show dialed in, you're happy with it. And it does change a little bit weekly, but if you saw the show a year ago and you see it now, there'll be several things different, but from week to week, it stays basically the same. And then I realized when my wife and I went and saw Hamilton several years ago, we, of course, just loved it so much. And then we come home, we're like, immediately, we have to bring our kids. Kids, you got to see Hamilton. You won't even believe it. We get tickets, and it was like months later that we went because it takes so long to get the tickets. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, if they had come out and done a bunch of different songs and different routines, I would have been like, no, no, no. I want to see the thing that we liked. I want to see those songs again. So I think it makes sense to keep the show the same,
Yeah, that makes sense. Like that familiarity of something that you really enjoy, like it's reliable, right? Like especially in a city that does, yeah, have shows that are doing the same thing, daily. Um, I'm curious because there's obviously, like you mentioned, like so many different shows happening in the space. Like, what do you think differentiates your show to help bring in that kind of multi-generational dynamic?
Well, there's a lot of things. I mean, we try to distinguish our show in every way possible because we feel like one of the ways that you survive is by offering something that nobody else is offering. It's a unique thing that you can only see with us. So even starting with the pricing, for example, if you want to take a family of 4 to a Harry Potter play, it's going to cost $1,000 probably, right?
Easy.
Right, right. And with us, our ticket prices start at $25 and go up to 50, okay? Which is such a bargain. In Midtown, in the theater district, it is unbelievable. And we did this because we looked at the pricing in the other venues, and like let's say the closest show to ours, I would say, is Jamie Allen's Amaze, although his is a very deluxe theatrical production with lasers and all this, very heavy produced show. And we're in a comedy club. So, but his lowest ticket price starts slightly higher than our highest ticket price. So we've got our own lane on pricing. And then secondly, our show is all about being an immersive kind of experience. We're calling people up from the audience, kids, adults, moms, dads, mostly kids, calling them up almost for every single routine, getting them involved, having them help with the magic. And that's one of the things that makes the show very unique every time is when you have a kid on stage, totally unpredictable what the kid is going to say or do. And everyone loves this. I love it. Everybody loves it because sometimes that kid will just say something that just brings a house down. And it's just such a joy and such a thing. At our very first show, we did the typical thing that you hear at most shows where they say, all right, everybody, please silence your cell phones, turn your cell phone off, put it away, no cameras, no pictures, no recording. And then I went home after the first show and I'm like, oh, did anybody get pictures? I want to post them online. And I'm like, you dummy, you just had 200 people in there. They all had phones. So the very next time we did a show, we had the announcer say, here at the Broadway Magic Hour, we encourage the use of cameras. Take photos, take videos, but do so in a way that doesn't distract others. And if you post your photos online, tag us at hashtag Broadway Magic Hour. And, people go home from the show and you've got like a PR crew. They're sending out to their own networks and they're posting stuff. And none of the other magic shows do this. I tell them, I'm like, you are crazy. I'm worried somebody's going to put the whole show online. No, they're not. Nobody wants to watch your show for an hour online anyway. If they want to watch your show, they want to go see it live. They'll post a clip, but I don't know. It's so funny.
No, I think you're right too about how people digest things on the internet. They want to see 30 seconds, 60 seconds. They're not going to sit and watch a
Right.
whole, hour show, typically, I should say. But it's
Well,
also
if somebody
genius.
did put the whole show on YouTube or something, I would DM them a little message and say, "Hey, this is Jim from the show. We'd appreciate it if you take it down." And if they didn't, I'm sure they would. 99% would. And if they didn't, you just send it thing to YouTube and say it's copyrighted, take it,
Right.
and they would take it down. But you don't have to worry about it.
I think that when you talked about how like the anticipation of audiences have changed with social media, that sounds like one of the benefits of it though too, though, is having they're taking the clips or they're posting about it online. You mentioned kind of like your own little PR firm kind of taking it away. That does probably make it easier to get the word out there about your show.
It's so true. And I feel like the show doesn't just live on the stage. That's part of it. That's a really big, that's the heart of it. But the show also continues on social media. And I think you really have to look at I think so many old school theatrical performers, they think that they've got this live event and that's all it is and that's all it should be. And I just don't believe that at all. I think it really, because I know for my kids, if it didn't happen on Instagram, it didn't happen, So
True, right? So with this show, then, having made this show for families and stuff like that, what trick, without giving away, obviously we don't want to give away the magic trick here, but which one are you either like the most proud of, or which one do you feel like dazzles audience the most, or which one like kind of would you say defines this experience?
oh my gosh, there's just so many. I mean, it's one of the things that Carl and I talk about a lot is that every moment is it sets up for another moment later. There's kind of like this payoff, but it's actually setting you up for a bigger payoff later. But I will say, in answer to your question, the most challenging thing for us to figure out was the very first opening effect. And we tried several different things, and the show was never terrible even when we had a subpar opener, in our estimation, looking back, subpar at the time, the best we could do, but it took us a while. And finally, one day I had an idea and I brought it to Carl, and he thought about it, and he came back to me with another twist on it, and then that made me have another thing. This is the other thing about having two people working on a show together, is it sort of starts to be like a flywheel, where, oh my gosh, that idea made me think of this, that made me think of that, and boom, 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 boom. And then by the time that we had completely dissected what this could be, which took 2 or 3 days of back and forth, we had something that not only was going to be the perfect lightning fast opening effect to get everyone involved and also put parents at ease, knowing, okay, this show is going to be good. This is not going to be lame. This is not going to be boring. I'm going to be fooled by this. I'm going to be into it. It's not just for the kids. You have to address so many things and set up your characters. My character believes in magic. Carl's character is more of a skeptic. I always think about it as my character is a little bit more like Doug Henning, if you know who he is, and his is a little bit more like Harry Anderson, if you know who he is, right? So you have these two, and those are the two sides of the coin of magic, is wonder and belief on one side, and trick and method on the other side. And so, but that opening routine, which we make a bowling ball appear, okay, but it happens in such a surprising way, and such a way that's unexpected, and a way that defines both of our characters, that the very first time we did it, and the room just exploded. The response was explosive. We just knew that was it. And I can't imagine opening the show any other way now. So it's just so much fun.
That's so awesome.
And, with this show, I know you kind of mentioned earlier on some of the themes throughout. Is there any particular thing that you're hoping, as your audience is walking away from the show, something specific that they're taking with them?
Totally. And it's really our whole reason for doing the show. Um, I have to kind of backtrack a little bit by mentioning that one of my great mentors in magic was a man named Eugene Berger, and he was one of the greatest close-up magicians of all time. He was also a philosopher. And, people really think of him as the philosopher of magic. He has passed away now, but he was just an unbelievable force in magic. And about 20 years ago, I was studying with him, and I was doing some card tricks and some stuff that I was working on. And he kind of watched, and he looks at me and goes, "Jim, do you believe in magic?" And I'm like, "No, Eugene, what are you talking about? These are card tricks. No, don't be silly. What are you talking about?" He goes, "We're magicians. If we don't believe in magic, who will?" And I went, "Whoa, whoa." I'm like, "All right, I have to think about this." And then he went even further, and he said, "Just because there's a trick to it doesn't mean it's not real magic. The magic happens inside the person's head who is watching. And so if real magic happens here, that's all that matters. Real magic happened." So I started
I love
having to
that.
rethink everything, not even just magic, but just like even things in my life. I was thinking, wow, if magic is, if I can believe in magic, that makes everything different. And so we do want people to believe in magic. And what does it mean? Oh, believe the trick that I did was really magic? No. What it means is, magic to me is you can honestly do anything in your life that you want to. Do you think Barack Obama ever expected to be president of the United States? It's there's the sky is not even the limit. The sky is just the beginning. The universe is the limit, and you can really do anything. And I always felt lucky because my parents, as I was growing up, always told me that, and I believed it. I never even had any question, but I always wonder if there's some kid or even some parent that sees our show that hasn't been told that, or that doesn't, or hasn't been told that by someone who actually believes it. And we really do want people to leave feeling uplifted and feeling like whatever problem I might be facing in my life, I saw a guy do something so impossible today that can't be explained. This problem that I have, I think can be solved. I just saw something else happen that cannot be solved. So, and believing in oneself. So those are those two messages. And we're never really preachy about it, but we do drop it in at select moments during the show, and we hope that it sticks.
That's such an incredible message to take away for people. Jim, thank you so much for being here today with us. It's been such a pleasure. But before we let you go, where can people find you on the internet, but also find out more about the show?
BroadwayMagicHour.com is our website. Also on Instagram, at Broadway Magic Hour. On Facebook, at Broadway Magic Hour. So pretty simple. I also have my own personal magic website, which is jimvines.com, so people can check me out there as well. But we hope that you guys, the next time you're in the city, hit me up. I'll get you tickets to the show. I know somebody who can get you in for free. So that's for you guys. And for all your listeners out there, definitely come check us out. We love having people. We have people from all over the world come to the show, from Europe, from all over the States, from everywhere. And it's really, especially if you have a family group with you, you'll really love it.
Well, thanks to everyone listening for joining us here in our box seats. Until next curtain call.